Okay, good morning and welcome back to our Parsha webcast. This week we are learning the Parsha of Vayishlach, which continues the story of Yaakov and Esav. As I mentioned was the sciatic nerve that we're not allowed to eat when you slaughter a kosher animal. Is that even, in other words, that part of the kosher animal you have to remove. Now, that part is in the hind part of the animal. And the truth is that today's days, most kosher butchers don't even, the meat that you buy in the kosher butcher shops are primarily from the front part of the animal. We don't even deal with the back part of the animal. It's very difficult to deal with. You have to separate the veins from the meat. It's not an easy thing. In Yiddish, it's called treiberen. And only certain people know how to do that. Only certain professional butchers know how to do that. But most meat today that you buy in the kosher butcher shops are not from that part of the animal because it's hard. But if someone that knows how to separate those parts of the animal, the fats and this sciatic nerve, so the rest you can eat, and you could get it. But it's not easy. Now, I want to talk about this phenomenon. Why we have the mitzvah of the Gidan Nosher. Why are we not allowed to eat the Gidan Nosher? This sciatic nerve. So the Torah tells us. It's in this week's portion, and I told you the story that when he was fighting with the angel of Esav, he had knocked him, struck him on that area of his body, of Yaakov's area, and he dislocated it. And to remember that, the Torah is very clear. Al Kain, therefore, the Torah says, the Jewish people shall not eat this part of an animal forever. Because that's the part that Yaakov was hit, and therefore to remember this, we don't eat that part of the animal. Now, there are also many details, because this one mitzvah, not every mitzvah in the Torah has a reason. The Torah doesn't tell us why you're not allowed to eat pork. The Torah doesn't tell us why. A lot of things, the Torah doesn't tell us why. Even though we know some of the reasons why. In this case, the Torah tells us why. And because of it, we also learn some of the details of the mitzvah. For example, it's only the part of that's on the socket. Bird, for example, the whole law doesn't apply to birds because they don't have that part of that socket they don't have. So you can eat the meat that's what we would call that nerve they can eat because it doesn't have the socket, because we learn it all from the details of Jacob. Since by Jacob it was on the socket that was removed, therefore only an animal that has the socket you're not allowed to eat it. But an animal that doesn't have it, like a bird, you're allowed to eat it. So in other words, we learn all the details from Yaakov because the Torah gives us the reason. Because he struck Yaakov, so we have to now see what did he strike. If that's the reason, we have to go into the details, see what happened there, and based on that, we know what we're not allowed to eat. Therefore, there's also a dispute in the Talmud as to the details of, are you allowed to eat the left side? He hit Yaakov on the right side. Are you allowed to eat the left side? Because that didn't happen to Yaakov. So one opinion says you're allowed to. And the Chachamim say you're not allowed to, because they have the opinion that he hit both sides, actually. He knocked them both. He removed both. So we don't eat both. Okay. But we see from here how, because the Torah gives us the reason, so therefore we get into all the details of the reason. Now, it's interesting that in this reason that the Torah gives, the commentators do delve into it, and they get into the generality of the story. Why in this case does the Torah tell us a reason? Why in this case does the Torah tell us the reason why not allowed to eat the Gidan Nosher? And it's interesting to note that really, this pasuk, people don't know this pasuk, which says, therefore, the Jewish people shall not eat the Gidan Nosher, this sciatic nerve, because Yaakov was struck in the Gidan Nosher, was not said. That was said by Matan Torah. God said that told that to Moses at Mount Sinai. In other words, this pasuk is inserted in Parshas Vayishlach out of place. It wasn't said over here. It was said by Mount Sinai. It was placed over here to teach us by the story that you should know that the reason you're not allowed to eat the Gid Anosha is because of the story of Jacob. In other words, even though late, as a few hundred years later that we were told not to eat the Gid Anosha, but the Torah puts that verse in the wrong place, so to say. As I say wrong, it's not wrong. Wherever the Torah it is the right place. But the Torah inserts it in not in where it was said. It's portions ahead, back, portions way, way back. The Torah puts it. That's how important it is to emphasize that this mitzvah has the reason, and the reason is because Jacob was strong. What lies behind this? What lies behind this? So one of the commentators tell us that with this incident of Esav's angel and Yaakov, with this we remember the great salvation that Hashem saved Jacob. And that wasn't just an individual salvation, because you can ask the question, we remember this one incident. You know, how many times did Yaakov have problems? He fought with Lavan cheated him, and Jacob fought with kings, and with who knows, not Jacob, I mean Abraham. There's so many different things that happened to our forefathers where God intervened to save them, yet we don't have a mitzvah to remember those things. Right? We don't have a mitzvah to remember those things. It's this one thing that we have a mitzvah to remember. Why? Why is this singled out that although it's an important thing, Yaakov was saved from a fight? It's not the first one that had a fight in the Bible. He's not the last one that would have a fight in the Bible. Yet we don't have a mitzvah to commemorate it. Why this one do we have a mitzvah? Says the famous commentator in the mitzvahs, the one that of the Sefer HaChinuch, and we're not even sure who wrote it. There's an interesting debate as to who's the author. But he writes that the reason is because in this fight between Esav and Yaakov is the perpetual struggle between the Jewish people and the descendants of Jacob. God was kind of telling us, remember this incident. And I'm giving you a sign, a mitzvah to remember this, because you're going to need to remember this. Because you're going to always be under their rule. A lot of your years, your history is going to be under the rule of Rome. And they're going to try to destroy you, and they have. And Hashem, I will always save you from them. So this is not just an incident that happens with Jacob and Esau, but it's a prototype for what's going to happen to the Jewish people. And they may fall into despair. So God says, this mitzvah I'm giving you, to remember that I'm going to, just like I saved Jacob from Esau, I'm going to save the Jewish people from Esau's descendants from Rome. And all those that come after Rome, which is the Nazis, and all those that descended from that lineage. So it's more a general salvation. But there's the question. The question is, if you're going to have if you want to remember this great salvation, this miracle that happened to Jacob, imagine it's a miracle. He's fighting an angel. A human being is fighting an angel, and the angel loses. It's an interesting phenomenon. So that's the great miracle. You want to commemorate the miracle. So how are you remembering it? By giving us a mitzvah that has to do with a tiny detail in it. I mean, here's the sciatic nerve. Is that really the story here? Is that really the issue? So how are we remembering it by not eating the sciatic nerve? That's so inconsequential. There's a lot of mitzvahs that we're given to remember things. Pesach. What do we do on Pesach? Everything we do that night is to reflect our feeling of freedom. That makes sense. On Pesach, we were set free. So everything we do that night is to reflect that freedom. We lean on our left side like kings, and we drink wine, and all those things. Shabbos. What do we do on Shabbos? We rest. Why do we rest? Because God rested on Shabbos. The commemoration is commensurate with what happened. Makes sense. But this doesn't. You're telling me not to eat the sciatic nerve. I mean, he fought with Jacob. There was a major battle. The sciatic nerve is the issue over here. I mean, it's a tiny detail. Commemorate it in some other way. Give us some mitzvah that commemorates the whole fight, how we saved him from the fight. Sciatic nerve is like a tiny detail in this. It doesn't seem right to that should become the remembrance, that big reminder that God will save us from all future Esav battles. The sciatic nerve, if anything, the contrary, that's the part where Esav's angel did succeed. He destroyed the sciatic nerve, right? If anything. So that's the question.
Rabbi, do we know the reason why the angel would have dislocated the hip? Any significance to that?
I don't know why why the angel hit him specifically there. I don't know. Not sure. There probably is some significance to it, but Torah doesn't really show it. That's where he hit him. Kind of like he couldn't get him. He couldn't knock him down, so he struck him to get at least a little bit of a blow. Why there? Not sure. There probably is reason. We have to look it up. So we have over here two extremes. On the one hand, this mitzvah is meant to remember something extraordinary, that God will save the Jewish people from all future Esavs to come, which is basically our whole history. The faith that we should have in God, that He will take care of us. It's a big thing. How are we to remember this? By not eating the sciatic nerve of an animal, which was the sciatic nerve that Yaakov got dislocated. It's like you're remembering something magnificent with something so insignificant. It's obvious that if the Torah tells us to remember this magnitude miracle by something so inconsequential, it's obvious that there's a reason why the Torah gives us this reason. It's not just so I said, and that's it. It's one of God's decrees. There's got to be some reason behind it that we can appreciate. So that's what I want to share with you today. But before, in order to understand that, I want to talk to you about divine providence. You know what divine providence means? Divine providence is God's constant providence over creation and everything in it. Now, we know that the Baal Shem Tov, for example, and that's what we're remembering, right? The idea of the Gida Nosha is about divine providence. We're told to remember that God will take care of the Jewish people. His providence upon the Jewish people is secure. Don't worry, He's going to be there for us. That's why we have this mitzvah. Now, you know that the Baal Shem Tov added a very important component in this idea of divine providence. Up till the Baal Shem Tov, what does divine providence mean? That every single detail of creation is directed by God. For example, you see that tree out there? The wind is blowing it, and the leaves are moving a little bit north, a little bit east. Right? The wind is blowing it a little bit north, a little bit east, right? Is that significant? Is God making that happen? Does it make a difference if it blows one way or blows the other way? That's Hashgacha Pratis. That's divine providence also. God is making it go east and not south and not west. The grass that's growing there, they're growing crooked. One of them is growing crooked. Is that by chance or is that by divine providence? It's by divine providence. Not only is it by divine providence, says the Baal Shem Tov, but it's not only God's making that happen, but it also, the fact that that's growing a little bit crooked relates to the whole purpose. It has a connection to the whole purpose of creation. It has to grow that way. Because if it wouldn't have grown that way, the whole purpose of creation would be out of sync. Every detail is part of the ultimate fulfillment of the purpose of creation. Now, this is an idea that is really revolutionary if you think about it. Up to the Baal Shem Tov, there were different opinions about the extent of divine providence. For example, there were some of the great sages that understood divine providence as mainly that the detailed divine providence is only on human beings. But in the animal, vegetation, and inanimate worlds, it's a general providence, but not detailed. If the elephant walks and steps on a glass and breaks it, the perception was that wasn't necessarily divine providence. Yes, that there will always be elephants, that's divine providence. He's making sure there should always be animals. But that if the elephant walks an inch before, an inch further, it's not divine providence. Hashem says it is. And not only is it divine providence, but if they would walk 1 inch further, and it wouldn't have broken that glass, the whole purpose of creation would be out of sync. That's all part of the purpose. The truth is, if you want to talk a little bit more deeper about divine providence, the Rebbe, for example, brings a proof that the Baal Shem Tov is right from the Talmud. Talmud says, it's the Talmud, our sages tell us, that there's a certain bird, we talked about it before, that its nature is to fly into the water, schlep out a certain fish, and eat it. That's what it does. I thought it was the pelican, but it turns out it's a different bird. The Gemara says that this bird, called in Hebrew Sholach, God makes it happen. God does that. Why? It's part of God's judgment for the animal world. There's certain fish that deserve to die. So what does Hashem do? He sends this bird to pluck it out of the water and kill it, because it deserves to die, because it killed other fish. Who knows why? It's part of the overall judgment of God of this world, the world of the world of fish. So God sends the shah. So is it divine providence or not? Of course it is. Even the animal, even the non-human world. So there you have a proof clearly that even the animal world is under the divine providence in specific. So Baal Shem Tov obviously added, or one should say revealed. He didn't add because it was always true. That level of divine providence was always true, but Baal Shem Tov revealed it. And the truth is, you wonder, is that really possible? Could you really say that if the grass grows crooked, that relates to the whole purpose of creation, right? It sounds a little far-fetched, right? But it isn't, if you think about it. Let's take a woman in her house. A woman is a balabosta, we say in Yiddish, right? So that runs a household. She makes sure that in the china closet you have certain little pieces of silver and this. And then you have the little coffee table. On the coffee table there are magazines or books for people to read if they come in. And in the kitchen everything is, someone that is on top of her, her game. She runs a household tip-top, right? It's all perfect. Nothing in that house is there for no reason. If she bought it, and she placed it somewhere, it's because it adds to the beauty of the house. It adds colors, whatever it is. Nothing is there for no reason. If it's there, there's a reason for it. She bought it, she brought it there. And it fulfills a certain purpose of what she's trying to project in her own house, right? So if it's true about a woman, or a man, a regular human being in this world running their house, God now is running this big house, this big world. So you want to tell me that there's parts of this world, there's parts of this world that He created for no reason, that has nothing to do with anything. It's just there. He's putting it there, but no reason, doesn't need to be there. But why is He putting it there? So it's not so far-fetched. It makes perfect sense. It's perfectly rational and logical. If there's something in God's world that He brought here, and He brought everything here, there's a reason why it's here. If every single piece of furniture or every little paper in your house is there for a reason, you don't think it's true with the God's house? It doesn't, and not only is there but it has to do with the overall fulfillment of the house, which is God's world. So if a blade of grass is growing one way and not the other way, it's also for a reason. Now, could we understand always what's the reason for this blade of grass going that way? Of course, He didn't share with us everything, why that's important. But it is. It's perfectly logical that if it's in God's world, if it's happening, if He's making it happen that way, that there's a reason. Unless you're saying God just does things random. God doesn't do things random. You don't even do things random. Imagine God. Do you do things random? Could you think of something you did in the last 24 hours that you say, just did it? It fulfilled no reason whatsoever. I don't think you could. It did something at that moment. There was a reason why it did it. And God's that way much more. Nevertheless, the Baal Shem Tov says there's obviously a difference between His providence on everything in the world and specifically on the Jewish people. There's a difference between His providence of every other creation as opposed to the Jewish people. With the Jewish people, it's a much stronger providence. What's the difference? So this is the previous Rebbe says, for example, that the providence on the Jewish people, the divine providence as it relates to the Jewish people, is so wondrous that it's almost impossible to understand it, to appreciate it. What's so wondrous about it? I'm going to try to give you an example. Let's take a business. I give this example a lot because it's a good example. When a person opens up a business, what's the reason he's opening up the business? To make money. So what does he really want? What's the ultimate desire here? A profit. But then you look at the guy, the owner of the business, and you see he's schlepping fax machines, and he's schlepping computers, and he's schlepping desks, and he's going to Office Depot, he's schlepping reams of paper, and the guy is occupied all day long with things that have nothing to do with making money. Yes, and he's ordering window treatment for his offices, and he's putting in carpet for the offices, and he's busy with all kinds of things, not making money. You ask the owner, you want this window shade? He absolutely says yes. He says, I absolutely want it. But we can all appreciate and understand that is what I would call a secondary desire. It's not the ultimate reason. It's not the ultimate reason for that. He doesn't want that window shade because he wants window shades. He wants the window shade so that when he's in his office working and making money, the sun shouldn't shine in his eyes. He wants the fax machine so that he should be able to send a fax when he needs to. He wants a computer because he needs to be... But what's the real reason why he wants the computer and the window shades and everything in there? So it can serve the ultimate purpose, which is to make a profit. If the accountant comes to him at the end of a period and tells him, sir, this business is never going to make a profit for you. I see the numbers. It's not going to make a profit. What happens to the whole enterprise? He sells it. He puts it up for sale. It's over. Doesn't need the window shade. He doesn't need the fax machine. He doesn't need any. He doesn't want any of it anymore. Because it was never a desire. He never wanted it for its own purpose. It was only there to make a profit. The minute that ultimate desire and will is gone, the rest is gone. In God's world, there's also the ultimate desire, and then there's a secondary desire. It says in the beginning of the Parsha of Bereshis bara Elikim es hashamayim v'asaretz. In the beginning, God created heaven and earth. So our sages tell us that the word Bereshis you should break up in two words. Beis, Reshis. Beis is two, and Reshis means special, first, unique. In other words, why did God create heaven and earth? Because of these two things that are special. Which are those two things? The Jewish people and the Torah. That's what God wanted. That's the prophet. The prophet is that Jews should be here and do mitzvahs. That's the prophet. But he has to, for that to happen, he needs to have trees, and he needs to have oceans, and he needs to have stones, and he needs to have animals, he needs to have all the other elements of creation. Just like in the business. In order for the business to make a profit, you need faxes, you need desks, you need office space, you need all those things. But that's not the purpose. That's not what the real desire is. Understood, right? That's pretty. So the Jewish people and Torah are the ultimate reason why God went through this project called creation. He wants Jews who will do Torah mitzvahs. When that happens, there's a profit. When that doesn't happen, there's a loss. If God forbid that there's a time when no Jews are doing any mitzvahs, the enterprise comes to an end. It's no more. Creation comes to an end. It'll never. It never happened because it was always Jews doing mitzvahs. But if that stops, then the business closes. There's no reason for the fax machine. The whole reason is to make a profit. So the Jews and the Torah are the profit. If that's understood, you can understand also that the divine providence as it relates to Jews is also on a higher level than it is with everything else. Although every detail of that office is set up to serve the business purpose, right? When you talk to the owner of the business, say, why did you put this type of desk and this type of chair and this type of whatever pictures on the walls? It creates an ambience, it creates an environment, it creates a setting. It's all for a purpose. There's nothing there without a purpose. But everyone understands that the actual business deal, when he gets down to it and is making the money, he's signing a contract, over there the details are, it's a stronger interest and involvement. Correct? Obviously the picture on the wall in the conference room is important. But the details of the prophet are much more important. Says divine providence is in everything. He's controlling everything in the office. He's making sure that the pictures are not crooked, that they're straight, so that the potential client comes in, doesn't look at the places, says, not organized. But where's the divine providence much more? Where's his interest much more emphasized? Of course, in the ultimate purpose, which is the prophet. So therefore, although it's true, says the Baal Shem Tov, that everything in the world is by divine providence, because everything serves a purpose. I want you to appreciate this. Every tree in the street, and every piece of asphalt, and every blade of grass, and every single bird, and every single animal, and every single human being. It's all for the purpose of Torah mitzvahs. So they're all there to serve that purpose, and therefore nothing is extra. If God put it there, it's not extra. It serves the purpose. However, when we're talking about the actual purpose itself, which is Torah mitzvahs, and the Jews doing Torah mitzvahs, over there the divine providence is even more. It's stronger. It's much more emphasized. Let me add one point.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Well, how do the things that don't serve the divine purpose?
There's no such thing.
Well, then what about people like Esau?
He serves the divine
purpose. Or ones who were like trying to do things that are wrong.
They all serve a purpose.
Okay.
Every single blade of grass serves a purpose, let alone people. Now, they may be going against Hashem, but that's also part of the purpose, to show a balance. To show us how to choose right over wrong. So evil is also part of the purpose. I'll add one little detail here, and then we'll move on and close this subject. When it comes to everything else besides the Jewish people and Torah, so in those things, the divine providence would be dependent on the amount of importance it plays. For example, let's take a human body. Yeah? The human body is all important, right? Important. Plays a role in God's purpose. But would you say the hair plays the same role as the brain? No. You can live without hair. You can live without nails. You can even live without an arm. I can go, further and further in the level of importance. So in those things that are secondary, so the divine providence depends also on how important it is. The more important, the more the providence. But when you're talking about the purpose itself, the Jewish people in Torah, there's no difference. Every part of the Jew and every part of Torah and mitzvahs is equally important. Because if they're the purpose, they're all important. It's all important. I'll give you an example, like when it comes to Torah, yeah? Cite an example. Where do you see that in Torah the last detail is important? It's all equal. If someone wants to convert to Judaism, and he says, I want to convert and do all the mitzvahs except for one. Except for one mitzvah I don't want. This one I don't feel like doing. It's not I don't feel for it. I'm willing to take it all on. Except, for example, to wash my hands in the morning. That I don't want to do. Or whatever. Any mitzvah I'll give you. You're not allowed to accept such a kind. The one that he doesn't want to accept is a little detail. It's not even such an important mitzvah. Now rabbis tell us, you're not allowed to measure importance of mitzvahs. The Mishnah the rabbis tell us this. Don't sit and measure them, the big ones, the small ones. From God's point of view, they're all equal. It's His will, it's all the same. And therefore, even if it's a little minhag, a custom, sorry, it's all the same. Because that's when we're talking about Torah, which is the purpose itself. But if you're not talking about the purpose itself, you're talking about the surround, that which serves the purpose, well, there would be a difference. The more important it serves the purpose, the more the divine providence is there, the less. It doesn't mean that there's no divine providence for the small details. They're all small. The little bit of glass also has divine providence. But obviously in bigger things there's more of an interest. There's a more divine providence, a greater providence. This explains us why, when we want to remember this one event with Jacob and how he was saved from Esau, this is going to be the precursor for all the perpetual struggles for the Jewish of Esau's descendants against the Yaakov's descendants. Why it's remembered with such a small detail? Because with this, God is telling us the tiny details are important to me as the big details. Divine providence by Jews is on the tiniest detail as much as the biggest detail. There's no difference. It's a little, it's an incidental, but the actual part of the story, which is Torah mitzvahs, I'm going to remember. The Jews doing Torah mitzvahs, over there the divine providence is even more. It's stronger, it's much more emphasized. Let me add one point.
Rabbi, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
How do the things that don't serve the divine purpose?
There's no such thing.
Well, then what about people like Esau?
He serves the divine
or
purpose.
ones who were trying to do things that are wrong.
They all serve a purpose.
Okay.
Everyone serves, every single blade of grass serves a purpose, let alone people. Now, they may be going against Hashem, but that's also part of the purpose, to show a balance, to show us how to choose right over wrong. You know, so evil is also part of the purpose. I'll add one little detail here, and then we'll move on and close this subject. When it comes to everything else besides the Jewish people and Torah, so in those things, the divine providence would be dependent on the amount of importance it plays. For example, let's take a human body. Yeah? The human body is all important, right? Important. Plays a role in God's purpose. But did you say the hair plays the same role as the brain? No. You can live without hair. You can live without nails. You can even live without an arm. I can go, further and further in the level of importance. So in those things that are secondary, so the divine providence depends also on how important it is. The more important, the more the providence. But when you're talking about the purpose itself, the Jewish people in Torah, there's no difference. Every part of the Jew and every part of Torah and mitzvahs is equally important. Because if they're the purpose, they're all important. It's all important. I'll give you an example, like when it comes to Torah, yeah? Cite an example. Where do you see that in Torah the last detail is important? It's all equal. If someone wants to convert to Judaism, and he says, I want to convert and do all the mitzvahs except for one. Except for one mitzvah I don't want. This one I don't feel like doing. It's not mine. I don't feel for it. I'm willing to take it all on. Except, for example, to wash my hands in the morning. That I don't want to do. Or whatever. Any mitzvah I'll give you. You're not allowed to accept such a comment. The one that he doesn't want to accept is a little detail. It's not even such an important mitzvah. Now rabbis tell us, you're not allowed to measure importance of mitzvahs. The Mishnah the rabbis tell us this. Don't sit and measure them, the big ones, the small ones. From God's point of view, they're all equal. It's His will, it's all the same. And therefore, even if it's a little minute, a custom. Sorry, it's all the same. Because that's when we're talking about Torah, which is the purpose itself. But if you're not talking about the purpose itself, you're talking about the surround, that which serves the purpose, well, there would be a difference. The more important it serves the purpose, the more the divine providence is there, the less the less. It doesn't mean that there's no divine providence for the small details. They're all small. The little bit of glass also has divine providence. But obviously in bigger things there's more of an interest. There's a more divine providence, a greater providence. This explains us why, when we want to remember this one event with Jacob and how he was saved from Esau, this is going to be the precursor for all the perpetual struggles for the Jewish of Esau's descendants against Yaakov's descendants. Why it's remembered with such a small detail. Because with this, God is telling us the tiny details are important to me as the big details. Divine providence by Jews is on the tiniest detail as much as the biggest detail. There's no difference. It's a little, it's an incidental part of the story. That's where we're going to remember it, in that incidental detail. But although you can still ask, I get it. You want to teach me a lesson in divine providence, how God's divine providence, but still, did you have to choose a small detail? Okay. The big details are just as good as the small details. So it goes a little deeper. With this I want to conclude. Over here we're not just talking about small details as opposed to great details, and the great message that when it comes to the Jewish people, which is the ultimate purpose of creation, small details are just as the great details. Over here we're talking about a much deeper concept. We're talking about the Jewish people. We're told, we read in the book of Deuteronomy in Ha'azinu, it says, Kechelek Hashem Ame Yaakov Chevel Nachalose. The Jewish people are a part of Hashem. Oh, part of Hashem, that's a whole new concept. And the Baal Shem Tov says, which is a logical idea, that we're talking about the essence. When you grab a part of the essence, you have the whole essence. In other words, every single detail of Hashem, which we are part of, is the whole essence. Right? We see this in Torah as well. And in every detail, you have the whole essence. We see it in the Jewish people. In every detailed Jew, you have the whole Jewish people. Let me give you two examples. There is a law in the Torah that if someone is busy with one mitzvah, he doesn't have to do another mitzvah. Right? If you're busy with a mitzvah, you don't have to do another mitzvah. For example, when you had a funeral, and you needed there to do the funeral, you don't have to. You don't have to say the Shema, even though you're going to pass. The time for the Shema will pass. Yeah, you're busy with the funeral, right? In the morning, it's a morning funeral. You're busy. You're burying. You're this. You're that. You're carrying the coffin, whatever it may be. And you see the watch. It's 9 o'clock, 9:05, 9:10. You're still busy. 9:15, the time of Shema ends. You don't have to stop to say the Shema. Are you going to miss the mitzvah? You're busy with another mitzvah. And all mitzvahs are interlinked. And what do I mean by interlinked? You think you're missing Shema? You're not missing Shema. What are the mitzvahs? The mitzvahs are the Hashem's will. We're talking about Hashem as the essence. The essence, it's an essential will. When you're talking about an essential will, it's all part of it. So you're doing one mitzvah, you got all the mitzvahs. You're not missing anything. You did what Hashem wants. You're in touch with Hashem's essential will. That's part of essential will. It's all interlinked. So the desire to do mitzvah, to do Shema, is the same will as the will to do a burial. So you're in touch with the will. That's what counts. In touch with Hashem. Where do we see that by? We see that by Torah. Where do you see that by Jews? It's a very interesting law. We see that every Jew is a whole world, and you see this an actual. It's manifested in a very interesting law. The law is as follows. If a person comes to you and says to this group of people right here, guy comes in here with a gun and says, you either give me, let's say me, and I'll kill him, or if you don't give him one person, we kill the whole group. We kill the whole group. So there's 10 people around the table here. So you make a calculation. Is it better to lose one? And he's going to kill that one person who's among the group. So he's going anyway. So at least save the other 9 or 10. What is the law? The law, of course, is that you're not allowed to give over a Jew to be killed. Let everyone die rather than give over a Jew to be dead. So one of the reasons it says, one of the reasons for this is, because every Jew, we're all part of Hashem, right? We're all interlinked. You kill one Jew, you kill all the Jews. There's no difference. It's not like you're getting 1 as opposed to 10. 1 is 10. We're all one. We're all the same. We're all part of this one essence of Hashem. So 1 is not more than 10. That's one of the reasons for this halacha. Because otherwise, logically, it doesn't make any sense. Let one person die rather than 10. He's dying anyway, so why take another 10 with you? Or another 100, another 1,000. It's no difference. The numbers don't count there. It would be true if it was 1,000,000 Jews. You don't give away one Jew Let all 1 million die, including that one person, which is an irrational thing. It doesn't make any sense. He's anyway dying a minute later, so why not just save everyone else? No, because one of the reasons is because every Jew is all Jews. So one is not more than 1 million. That doesn't mean that in other areas numbers don't count. Numbers count in certain things, but in life itself, numbers don't count in this case. Now, therefore, when we got back to divine providence, therefore the story of Jacob and the sciatic nerve is like this. When we talk about the divine providence of the Jewish people, every part of the Jewish people is part of the essence of Hashem. Ki chelek Hashem amen. The Jewish people are part of Hashem. It says our neshama is part of Hashem. Is there part of us that's less part of Hashem than not? So every single detail of the Jew there's no more important, less important. The divine providence on your ears as much as it is on your heart. And therefore, that's what the Torah is trying to convey here with the story of the sciatic nerve. The reason that the commemoration of this great miracle of divine providence, where God is going to continuously save the Jewish people from its enemies, which is the prototype for that story is Yaakov and Esav over here, the angel of Esav, which, by the way, I want to throw in in the story of the sciatic nerve. There's also a message there that in the history they will strike you blows. They will strike. It's not like you're going to get out unscathed. There will be a sciatic nerve damaged. There will be damage. They will succeed in striking blows against the Jewish people, but Yaakov will go away. He'll limp, but he will get out. He'll get away. It's also a message. It's a depressing message in a way, if you think about it. Why do we have to limp? I guess that's part of it. That's part of the ultimate golus, and that leads to Mashiach, that we have to go through this crucible called exile. But why do we remember that great miracle of divine providence through such an insignificant detail of the story? With this, God is teaching us there is no such a thing as an insignificant part of a story when it comes to the Jewish people. There's nothing insignificant. Every detail, the sciatic nerve is just as important as the brain. And that's why when you remember this, in that detail you have everything. Because it is part of the whole. When it comes to the Jewish people, the divine providence is complete in every detail, as much as the greatest detail. There is no bigger and smaller. We're all part of Hashem. We're all part of this. Like I gave the example of a mitzvah. You do one mitzvah, you have all mitzvahs. You kill, God forbid, you save one Jew, you saved all Jews. Or God forbid, one Jew dies, it's like all of us died. So there's no difference. It's the truth, and that's how divine providence works with the Jewish people. We are not there we're not there to enhance or serve the greatest purpose, the greater purpose. We are the purpose. And when you're talking about the purpose itself, which is Hashem himself, we are one with Hashem. The divine providence is on every single detail in the greatest possible way. Although in every detail of creation is divine providence, but not at the same level. There's differences in importance. With a greater part of, I'm sure, that when we talk about leave Jews out, but the whole rest of the world, there's no question that the divine providence on human beings is more than on grass. What do I mean by more? Not in detail. There's divine providence in all the details. But in the greater importance, he's there. There's a greater emphasis. There's a greater part of Hashem's divine providence. I can give you an example where you would see the difference, perhaps. In one case, you would see it go through direct. In another, less important things, it would come through natural forces. I can give you an example. God's providence could come through miracles, and it comes through nature. the more important, perhaps, will come through a greater manifestation of where you can see the providence, the hand of God. Lesser important things, it goes through nature. You don't see the hand of God. Doesn't mean that it's not the hand of God. But when it comes to the Jewish people, that doesn't apply. There's no greater and less importance. They're all the same. The sciatic nerve is just like the brain. That's a tiny detail. It's the greatest detail. It's the greatest part of the story. It's all part of the same. It's all part of Hashem's essence. And as such, it's all the same. One Yid is 1,000,000 Jews. One mitzvah is 613 mitzvahs, all the same. They're all interlinked. So there's no greater detail, less detail. And that's why the Torah chooses this detail of the story to remember this miracle. In the detail lies the whole thing. When it comes to my divine providence on you, the sciatic nerves is just as important as the greatest story of the greatest miracle. And that's what the Torah is trying to impart here. The level of divine providence as it relates to the Jewish people. Every last detail as it relates to your life is just as important as the greatest detail by God. Because you're one with Hashem. And when you're one with Hashem, every part of you is one with Hashem. With every mitzvah, the smallest detail is just as big as the biggest mitzvah. And who are we to say big or small? We're talking about God's essential will. Is there a difference in His essential will with one thing and the other? It's all part of His will. It's all part of His essential will. So everything else serves the purpose. When you're talking about things that serve a purpose, you measure important service, less important. There's no question. In a business, the secretary's effectiveness is going to be much more important to the boss than the window shade, the color of the window shade. Right? Because it serves the purpose. When something serves a purpose, what serves them more is more important. But when it comes to the purpose itself, it's like your children. It's not a detail that becomes insignificant. It's all part of it. It's all part of me. You come from me, you're part of me, you're one with me. And you're one with me, you're the purpose. The sciatic nerve is the brain, it's just as important as everything else. With that in mind, I'm sure next time you worry about, does God really think about me? Has He passed over me? Has He forgotten about me? Is He really concerned about me? You look to this portion. That is what lies in this portion. There's not a detail. The smallest detail is the biggest detail. The sciatic nerve is that which is chosen to remember this magnificent concept of divine providence for the Jewish people throughout history. With that I say have a good week.